Hey there, this is Pat Ennis of Ennis Legacy Partners. Welcome to the Exit Readiness podcast. I'm here with co-host Walter Dial, CPA and tax partner at GRF CPAs and Advisors in Bethesda, Maryland. Our mission here on the Exit Readiness podcast is to provide you, the business owner, with subject matter expertise on topics pertaining to building sellable or transferable business value, and then for planning your eventual exit from the business. We want to help you build a business that is transferable and then help you exit successfully on your own terms and conditions. Many, if not most, of the business owners that we work with in exit planning want to sell or transfer their business to children, family members, partners, or key employees, what we would call a sale to insiders. And for many reasons, this can take years to accomplish. And one of the major initiatives or actions that can take a long time is to train and equip your successor or successors to be owners. Successors typically become candidates for ownership because they've proven to be exceptional or key employees. And they've been good at their job or jobs that they've had throughout their history with the company. And they really seem to care about the business and maybe demonstrate the core values of the current owner. And so they've become candidates for ownership. But as you business owners who are listening understand, there's much more to being a business owner than there is to being even the most key employee. And if a successor isn't adequately equipped to be an owner, it can turn out bad for all stakeholders, Walter, in the business, including the successor and the selling owner. So today's topic is equipping your successor for ownership.
Yeah, I think this is going to be good, Pat. This is definitely an area that you have a wealth of knowledge on, certainly much more than I do. One thing I would like you to address, maybe before you dive into all the details, is, well, let me describe a situation we've seen a few times. You know, we have a new client come in, he's interested in transferring his business to, let's just say, his key employees. And he says, yeah, I got a great group, it'll be great. And we're like, okay, well, have you talked to them about your plan? And the answer is no. So I think one thing is, if you could address it, when does that conversation take place, and kind of what are some of the components of it? I kind of look at it like you have, and I could be wrong, so feel free to correct me, but I kind of look at employees, when you're looking in this context, you've got an employee who's a great employee, but they may not want to have an interest in being an owner. I mean, owning a company sounds great, but there's a lot of headaches and there's financial risks associated with it. So some people just aren't cut out for that, and that's fine. Then you have people who want to be owners, but they really don't have the ability to do it. And you can train them all you want, and maybe they're never going to get there. And then you've got the people who have the ability to do it and the desire to do it. And that's obviously what you're looking for. And I think one of the things you're going to talk about today is the second group I mentioned, where they have the desire but not the ability. They can be trained up. I didn't mean to say they can't be. I just think there are sometimes they can't be. So if you don't mind talking about the conversation that you envision an owner having with the group and when that takes place to kick us off, I think that'd be great.
Well, that's a great place to start, isn't it? Because that can be tricky. Because you absolutely, if you're an owner, if you've got someone who's just proven themselves to be very competent in whatever role you have them in, and they seem to really care about the business, and you're thinking, boy, I would like to see this business continue, sustain the culture, sustain the brand, sustain the location, and this person looks like a perfect candidate to transfer the business to because of what I see in them, to your point just a second ago. But then only to find out when you, the owner, are ready to exit. Maybe you and your spouse had a conversation on the weekend and your spouse said, hey, I'm done. When are we going to And you go and you talk to that employee at that point, and they say, "Oh no, I'm not. No, I don't want to be an owner. I don't want the risk. I don't want to work the way you work. Um, you go on vacation and you're still working, and I don't want all that." So that can just throw off the entire plan that the owner had, right? And you mentioned that. So it is good along the way if you start to think that there's someone in your business who could be a candidate to be a successor or successors, that when you're talking to them, maybe it's during their evaluation or in other times, you're just asking them, what do you see for your future? In regard to your professional development, of course, because that's what an employee evaluation is focused on, but also just in regard to your growth within the company. And just give them an opportunity to start to talk about what they might want or not want, without, and this is where the tricky part comes in, without making any commitments. Because this happens too. You and I have seen this, where an owner has made a commitment verbally, maybe not in writing, but verbally. And it might just be what they thought to be an off comment, but the employee takes it as
Right.
gospel truth. And, oh, I'm going to be an owner of this company one day, when that may not be the best thing. And and actually selling to a third party may end up being the best route for you to take, or something else other than trying to sell to this particular employee. So yeah, you're right. Those conversations, you really need to know what they want, this key employee or the kid. We've seen this, of course, where parents have just made an assumption about a kid or kids that they're of course they're going to want to own the business, only to find out, oh no, dad, no, mom, no, I don't want to own this. I'm looking forward to you selling it, making a whole lot of money so that you can just pass that on down to me.
Right.
But I don't want to own all this risk. I want a life and so on and so forth. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was really good. Thanks for that. So let's say that you've had that conversation, you identified a few people who are going to be great in taking over your company. What then are the key considerations in training the successor?
Yeah. Well, first off, if there's more than one, you got a whole, and we've talked about this before, Walter, not a few times. You got a whole different group of challenges. Because let's say that you've got two or three that you think, okay, they together can buy this company, and I think they could run it and take that. May very well be true. But first, there's a couple of things it has to be evaluated. The first thing is what you just said. Do they really want to be owners? Then number two is, do they have the temperament, and could they be an owner? It's a lot different. We'll talk about this a little bit more in a few minutes. A lot different being an owner than it is being a key employee. So do they have the temperament for it? And does their spouse have the temperament for it, really? Because you do own the risk and all. But then number three is, can these more than one successor, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, can they be owners together? Can they be partners?
Yeah.
Whole different set of, they may
Yeah.
even work real well together as key employees. But boy, when you get married in partnership, it changes things. And
Yeah, because
so,
you could even have one guy who, like two guys who work great together underneath the owner. Now maybe one of them is getting elevated above the other. That
yeah,
can
oh yeah,
that can cause all kinds of
that can
problems, right?
absolutely, yeah, that can absolutely be the case. And so, boy, these are all things that if you don't think through and really do some work, and again, one of the things we always point out is exit planning takes a long time. Well, this is one of the things that can take a long time, is just doing this kind of evaluation work and helping them make a decision, because it's not going to serve anyone for you to sell the company to an insider if the insider ends up not wanting to be an owner, or they don't turn out to be a good owner. Then the selling owner either has to come back into the business or, do
Yeah,
something.
'cause I think one important point in all this is when you do a transfer to insiders, almost, well, everyone I've ever seen, I think everyone you've ever seen as well, the owner's taking back a note. So he's really, he's dependent upon that company succeeding.
Yeah,
So it's critical that what we're going to be talking about today takes place to ensure that the management team can successfully run that business.
yeah, that's absolutely right. So taking back a note is almost always the case in small businesses with these insider transactions to some degree. And so it's ideal, the ideal situation, and we've got a couple of these situations right now, where the selling owner doesn't really need the money from the business. It'll be wonderful to have it, but they're going to be fine without it. They're not dependent on it, or they're not dependent on the full amount. Maybe they're, the amount that they can get up front, maybe through a downstroke and an SBA loan, whatever that can be right out the gate, is going to be enough. They'll be fine. If they don't get the rest, they'll be completely fine. And that's
Yeah.
that kind of situation's ideal. But too often, you're right, the owner selling is very dependent on what they get out of the business financially in order to do everything they want to do next. And so that's when it becomes even more, of course, there's more risky. And so you really need to do everything you can on the front end to dot the I's and cross the T's to ensure success.
Yeah. So what do you see then, what are some of the key considerations in the whole training process?
Right. So let's just say the work that we just talked about's been done. The conversations have been had, and let's just assume one successor for what we're going to talk about right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
The successor wants to be an owner. There's been evaluation work done that says, yeah, you know what? This person does have the temperament and so on and so forth. This exit route aligns with all of your goals, selling, owner, your time frame, and all of that. And so let's start to train the successor. Well, they have to, there's a knowledge transfer. I mean, they've got a certain level of knowledge about the business at this point because of whatever the role they've been in. Maybe it's sales, or maybe it's general manager or whatever. So they've got knowledge about the business, but there's still knowledge typically in the head of the owner or owners that hasn't yet been transferred to just ensure a comprehensive understanding of all aspects of the business, to include operations, finance, marketing, strategic planning. Maybe this key employee has been focused mostly, like right now, we're working with a business, family business, and the successor is going to be a son, and he's ownership material. His career has been mostly focused on sales and business development. So he needs a more a fully orbed, comprehensive understanding of all aspects: operations, finance, marketing, and strategic planning. So all that needs to be transferred to him. So knowledge transfer is one, and that can involve two, the current owner starting to be more intentional about what we talked about in our last podcast with Jason Hinderberg, documenting processes,
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Okay.
right? And listeners, if you didn't listen to that podcast, go back and listen to it, Jason Hinderberg, and about systems and processes. So that part of this knowledge transfer can be that. Let's identify what processes and systems have yet to be documented, and let's get those documented. So that's one thing, and it's pretty significant, is just transferring knowledge. And in doing that, the owner may or may not, to this point, have had kind of a mentor relationship with this key employee. I mean, a real intentional mentorship. And maybe that needs to be put in place in order to be as effective as possible in transferring the knowledge and wisdom, really, too. There's knowledge, but then there's wisdom and sound judgment as to how to use the knowledge to make the kind of decisions owners have to make. And sometimes a lot of times key employees don't have to make. So maybe a mentor, a more formally planned mentorship and guidance from the current owner to the successor is going to be needed. Those are two things that come to mind.
Yeah.
You have any thoughts about either one of those things from your?
Well, the thing I was thinking about from the mentorship, let me get your thoughts on this, because I know cases we've worked on, we've seen this happen both ways, but what are your feelings about the retired owner kind of hanging around in some capacity?
Yeah.
I mean, on the one hand, it's nice that they're there to, lend their knowledge and support. But on the other hand, I kind of have a feeling that certainly in some situations, as long as they're hanging around, people are still going to see them as the owner.
Yeah. It's a great question, and it's situational, I think. I mean,
Yeah.
It depends on a few things. How long are they going to hang around? And as they hang around, what's their role going to be? Now, we of course, as you know, me, we suggest to clients who are doing this, don't give up control until you get all the money out that you want to get out.
Yeah.
So in a situation like that, where, an owner says, I want to get 3 million out of this, and until I do, I'm going to be hanging around. Well, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So what's the hanging around going to be? What's your role going to be? And so on and so forth. So it depends on the situation. And it depends in that situation, how long are they going to be hanging around? Why are they going to be hanging around? And what are they going to be doing while they hang around? But that can make it tougher. It absolutely can. And that's one of the things that just needs to be looked at when you consider this whole exit route is, from a financial perspective, how long is it going to take for this successor to pay you? And while you're waiting to be paid, how long do you want to be in control? And while you're in control, if it's for 5 years, how's that going to affect them? And is it going to, does it lean toward, you know what? There's a lot of risk there. I don't want to go down that road. Let's just sell to a third party.
Yeah.
So.
One other question for you. So, oftentimes the business owner will have some really strong relationships of their own, as far, not like counseling, but people that he goes to for advice, like maybe his CPA, his attorney, his banker, people like that. How do you feel about, as part of this transition, establishing an advisory board that the successor owner can rely upon?
Yeah, well, advisory board or their own coaches and and advisors, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've started to do this, as you know, and actually there's nothing we're doing that I more enjoy than what, than this piece of
Yeah.
equipping successors. And, and then too, you're not asking this question, but this is part of what you just asked. That current owner over time has to start to introduce the successor to the bankers, to the attorneys, to whoever, to whoever the key relationships are. Now,
Yeah.
once the successor owns the company, they may change some of those relationships, of course. But either because it's necessary or because they want to, but in the meantime, they need to be connected to all those people. But no, they need, like we meet with the successor, we meet 2 times a month for 90 minutes. And then if they need help in between, of course, we'll be available. But one of those meetings, oh, and here's another piece while I'm thinking about it. In training the successor, equipping the successor, there's also a I don't know what the right word is here. It's not equipping. It's not really training either, I guess, but it's helping. It's certainly helping the current owner to change their, it's probably coaching, to change their role in the meantime. They need to let go more and delegate more. We talked about this a few weeks ago with Sarah Gillette's delegation. And so one of the meetings that we have each month with the successor is with the successor and the owner. And we talk about, okay, how's it going in regard to delegating responsibilities and so on and so forth. So there is a transition that takes place with the owner too, that actually can be even harder. And we've talked about this a lot. It can be harder for the owner, this whole process, than for the successor.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So I know in one of our very first cases together, you spent quite a bit of time coaching up the management team that included, I think, one family member that was going to take over a business. And that one was kind of interesting because, as I recall, the family member was not really the one who, he was part of the group that took over, but he was not the top guy, right?
Yeah, and we really didn't, in that situation, we didn't really provide any kind of coaching to the successor.
Okay.
No,
Okay.
we just helped figure out what the transaction was going to look like.
Okay.
And it's been successful.
Yeah.
One of the things we did do was just help the owner decide, is this guy, and it was really the key employee, and I'll answer your question here in a second because I do have an answer to it, was going to be ownership material. And it was quite clear he was going to be, because the owner of the business could go away for 3 months or 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever he'd go away for. And the company would end up running better with this guy running it. And he would get more concerned, I'll use that word, about things than the current owner would. And you just knew, okay, this guy's treating his business like it's his own before he's even owning any of it. And he operates it, and he actually operates it better, according to the current owner, better than the current owner. And so all that worked out. But yeah, so there was a kid involved too. Both the dad who owned the business and the son who was in the business, the son agreed with the dad, no, this key employee should be the guy that runs it and operates it. And yeah, I want to be an owner too. The son decided he wanted to be an owner too, but he was smart because it's working out real well, apparently.
Self-aware too.
Yeah,
That's really good.
self-awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then, of course, you've got, there's different skills that you have to develop. That's another piece of this in regard to training a successor. I used an example a few minutes ago where this key employee, the successor, his career has been mostly focused on sales and business development. So now he's got to learn a whole new skill set. He's got to learn management and communicating like a manager and a leader of an organization. And so it can be tricky. Like individual contributors, which is what he's been most of his career, they don't think about communicating like a manager. They have their goals and they want to go sell stuff. But when you start to lead and manage an organization, then the communication, that's just one area. The communication skills need to be much more broader and nuanced. So there's a skills development. So you got to identify and address any skill gaps that the successor has, and then of course provide training in those areas such as leadership, decision making, problem solving, and then just encourage hands-on experience in these things.
Yeah.
And so leadership training too. I just mentioned that's a big thing. You're leading now an organization, and or you're going to. And we talk a lot about core values, of course, in having those clear and foundational. And financial literacy is another big one. You and I know this, that, many business owners, small business owners, get to a certain point. They've been very successful. They've got strong revenue. They've got strong profitability. They've got a very strong standard of living. And they got there not always by knowing how well they're doing from a financial perspective, other than what's in the checking account. But in order to scale and grow and be strategic about that, you really need to start managing by the financial statements. And so financial literacy is a big thing that you usually need. There's usually coaching and needed on that. That's one of the things that differentiates us, because Corby's really good at that piece.
Yeah, for sure. Before we wrap up, can I ask you just one last question?
Yeah.
Kind of an unusual situation, but let's say you've got a company that for whatever reason, they've got great employees, no one who wants to become an owner, but everybody is very interested in the idea of keeping the culture, keeping the business where it is, keeping everybody employed, all that stuff. Have you seen situations where in a situation like that, the owner has to go out and hire a general manager or whatever? And again, this is a reason why you got to start early, especially in this situation. You could hire a manager or whatever, not like you said, don't promise them they're going to be an owner someday, but bring them in and try to find somebody from the outside who can come inside and you can train up as a successor. Have you seen that?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, that happens. Absolutely. No question. Because these days, it's not unusual for your employees, be they kids or your key employees, not to want to own a business.
Yeah.
They have different priorities and values, and they just don't want, as you put it from the very outset, all the headaches of owning a business. And so so that's one thing. Another thing that's possible, depending on how it, as you know, depending on the size of the business and some other parameters, an ESOP could be a potential solution in that kind of case, where they're all indirect owners, but they don't own it directly. But then, there are a ton of things to think about in doing an ESOP. Oh my gosh, it's
Yeah, for sure.
when it works, when it works and it works well, it works real well for everybody. But boy, when you put one in place, the first couple of years are typically pretty, they can be tough.
Yeah.
Particularly if you hit, particularly if you do it in a time when there's external things happening, like a downturn in the economy, and your revenue takes a dip like it never has before.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
ton of things to think about with an ESOP, but an ESOP can be a potential solution in that case.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, a few other things. Let me just mention real quick in regard to this to training that comes to mind for successors. I mentioned financial literacy a couple minutes ago. We did mention earlier, I think, customer and stakeholder relationships. So whoever the owner or owners have key relationships from a stakeholder, customers, vendors, suppliers, professionals, all of that they need to be introduced to all those people. They need to understand and become more involved with strategic planning for the company. And maybe strategic planning really hasn't been part of how the company has gotten to where it is right now. And it needs to, though, going forward. That's a piece, cultural alignment and core values, legal, tax, your world, and compliance. And then just an overall plan for succession needs to be constructed and work through with milestones and timeframes and all like that.
Yeah.
Because there's this, what we're talking about today is all the training stuff and equipping, but then there's the actual transaction that needs to be
Right, exactly.
right, structured and negotiated between both sides. So there's a lot of work to be done, and things like buy-sell agreements need to be decided on and put in place, and it takes a lot of time.
A lot of stuff.
A lot of hard
So,
work.
yeah. Well, thanks. I think this has been really, I think our listeners will learn a lot from this. Thanks for sharing all your wisdom with us. I'm going to go ahead and close this out unless you have something else to add.
No, that's good. Just as we always say, listeners, start now. Get started now.
Start early, for sure.
Mhm.
And listeners, if you want help in maximizing the value of your business or planning for your eventual exit, you can reach Pat at 301-859-0860, and I'm at 301-951-9090. You can access resources at grfcpa.com and nslp.com. As always, thanks for listening, and until the next time on the Exit Readiness podcast, this is Walter Dial and Pat Ennis signing off.